Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmaster, and welcome guest. I recused myself from complete ignorance on this subject because, as was stated, I am writing a book about the historiography of Monterey, so let me move along. There's a lot to cover. Junipero Serra, the Rooms and Ohlone Indians. The conflict still goes on. The discussion, the debate, we hate Serra, we love Roomsons, Roomsons were savages, Serra was a saint. Back and forth and back and forth. Historically, usually there's a smidgen of truth to both sides, and that is what I found through my research. Note, the Roomson Indians are over here, right? This is 1770. They're about here. Check out what is going to happen to these Indians that do in fact believe that they are the only human beings on the earth. They have not interacted with anybody else in what is estimated as between 3 and 10,000 to now 19,000 years. So the idea, because there was no writing of these tribes, the numbers are vast and confusing. So Spain owns all of this. England owns this. It's not yet America. Look how much the French own. A couple of years later, 1783, this is after 1770 when Father Serra has settled here, that look how much Spain has got here. You've got British territory. I mean, look at what has changed. And you've got the Russians up here now. You've got the Danes over there in Greenland. What is the idea, the likelihood that the Native Americans have a chance of their individual spaces in this country anymore? There's none. It's over. They've been inundated. The country's been taken over. Prior to this, between 1400 and 1710, this is what everyone believed, including the Roomson Indians, they were living on. California, the island. So this is sort of what they were living on, because you're protected by the Pacific Ocean here, and you're protected by the Sierra Nevadas here, and as far as everyone was concerned, you can't get there. And I love the guys, the gentlemen trying to get boats load of sailors to come, because they went by and they said things like, if you come to California on this ship for a couple of years, it's just flooded with all kinds of great hot chicks that are looking for guys. I swear to God. Women, 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 gold and diamonds and pearls. That is what California had to offer. They're trying to get, fake news. The actual religion, now they were Catholic. Serra was Catholic. Of course he was Catholic. Now he comes along with the conquistadors. He's with Bertal. He's with, he comes along because what they have seen through history so far is the fact that every time something's been taken over in this vast continent, the natives have been decimated by disease and they're being killed. The Spanish decide, we want a civilization. We want to actually go there and train the people, teach them agriculture. We're going to make them Spanish citizens. There was a 10-year project. The 10-year project was the idea, by the time they were done, Serra was to have taught them how to read, how to write, how to culture. They would be good Catholics. They would be getting married. They'd be doing all of these wonderful things, and they would own land. They'd be citizens. So that was the goal. Now the natives, like the Roomsons, the Roomsons, the Esselins, and the Salinians. Salinans. Very, very few. My big deal, my big question mark, because I always have a big question mark, is California, pre-Europeans, had 300,000 Native Americans. In 3 to 10,000 or more years. My husband and I could populate more than that. Just saying. I mean, think about what, how in the world did they just have so few people? I need to get going. They had so few people because they were doing things the Catholics didn't like. Did Father Sarah spank the ladies? Yes, he did. Boobs and women were carved by their people in order, they called it beauty, but it was really to see that the other tribes didn't take them. The Spanish men did not find them attractive. They were not marrying them. The way they solved their birth control problem to keep their population down to 250 in this area was through abstinence. They had separate quarters for the men and women the whole time. They had abstinence. Or they had manual or plant-based abortions the whole time. And then, last but not least, that horrified the Catholics, they smothered and strangled because the babies were soulless and imperfect when they were born. So the quality control was mom got to decide at birth whether or not this was a baby keeper. And if it was twins, no chance. Two males, not a chance, not doing it. Now the men kept themselves, during the times of abstinence, happy with, yes, the badash. The badash was a man-woman that lived with the men and took care of business, and that's just what they did. The Catholics were horrified. Father Sarah just couldn't quite cope with all of this shenanigans, and of course the people thought it was fine. That was their culture, so it's not a bad thing. Can we call them a bad thing because they had abortions and they smothered their babies and they had homosexuality? Well, to these natives, of course not. That was sensible. That kept them alive. That was their survival method. That kept the population down like the animals did. It was a wonderful way to do it. But the Catholics were not happy. They spanked them. They did. I'm moving on quickly. Unpaid slavery? No. They paid them in shells and beads and food. Cruelty? You have to decide for yourself when you read my book. Rape? Yes. The ladies were locked up at night, especially when these soldiers, these were Frenchmen. Frenchmen show up, they lock the women and children up. Sorry, they did. And for their own good, and you get an idea why. Imprisonment, that's why they did it. They did indeed lock the ladies up because there was sexual misbehavior going on with the soldiers. And you need to read this book. I did indeed bring you information to read afterwards for my sources. At the end of his life, this is what Father Sarah wanted. Father Sarah's whole life was spent not worrying about himself at all. He was a Franciscan friar. This was his actual space in the Carmel mission. He lived a meager, pious life. The things he did for the Indians that he loved dearly will break your heart. Meanwhile, when he was beatified, the city of Monterey honored him by beheading him at the Presidio. Was he a saint? Was he a sinner? That's for you to decide.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. I did try to recuse myself from this meeting earlier in the week, but Carl would not have any of it. Told me this morning I was coming whether I liked it or not. So here I am. And I'm happy to be evaluating Kyle's speech today. She was presenting number 4, researching and presenting. The object was to present a well-researched, well-organized speech on any topic. And I spoke to Kyle before the meeting. She said her major thing that she was looking for was, is her point getting across? Is it easily comprehended, the main theme of what she was going to say? And from my perspective, I did get her overall theme, which I interpreted as, answer to the question, is Junipero Serra a saint or a sinner? Well, it's complicated and it's a matter of perspective. There are sides to both sides of the story, and that is the big takeaway that I took away from the speech, and it really sparked my interest. So if she's trying to market her book, she did a good job. Because for me, I'm kind of interested to learn a little bit more about the interactions of the early settlers here and the natives. Several things I thought she did really well. The use of counter arguments is a very strong way to present a topic. You present one side and you present the other, and in this case, you kind of leave it open to the audience to determine which side of the fence they fall out on. And I think there's more to be learned about this topic before any of us make a kind of come to our own decision, but the use of counter arguments is very strong here. The pictures she pulled up, the historical pictures, were very interesting. I thought they added a lot to her speech. Her positioning and movement, I really liked how he came over here and spoke to us, looking out at the audience, but giving free line of sight to the pictures there, and then moving around and interacting with the audience was very effective. And you drove home, your key points were really driven home by your vocal variety and your use of language. I thought it was very engaging and kept my interest easily the entire time. There was 3 things here that I wanted to mention for areas for improvement, and really all 3 of them kind of have to do a little bit with timeline management. As you know, you went a little over, and I'm sure you know that some things you can do to fix that. I have a couple ideas. I thought you started out with a strong initial point. Your initial point was, is he a saint or a sinner? Well, there's 2 sides to the story. And then you went into a kind of a scene setter / background part of the presentation, which I thought went a little long. I thought you could have probably truncated the scene setter portion to get to your kind of your pros, your 2 sides of the argument. There were a couple of things that I thought were maybe tangentially related to your central point, specifically the role of the French and the part about the Indian overpopulation, which they're interesting, don't get me wrong, but when timeline is a concern, I think maybe minimizing the things that are tangentially related is helpful. And then because of probably the timeline, because the red light was staring at you, much like it is me right now, and the wrap at the end was a little rushed. So you made your 2 sides of the point, and then at the end, hey, bringing it all together in my overall conclusion was probably just a matter of the timeline being cut short, but I thought that bringing it together could have been a little bit stronger. But overall, great speech. You definitely met your objective, and I enjoyed it. Thank you.